The alarm rang at 5 a.m. sharp. Naraya Lane reached for her phone, silenced it, and laid still for a few seconds. She stared at the crack in the ceiling above her bed, the same ceiling she'd stared at every morning for the past year, same one that reminded her she wasn't in this for comfort. She was in it for survival. She slid out of bed, her socks brushing against the cold wood floor, and tiptoed past her mother's room. The oxygen machine hummed gently, like a lullaby wrapped in stress. Naraya had memorized every beep, every cough that interrupted the silence, every time the electricity blinked during a storm, and she held her breath until it came back on. By 5:30, she was dressed. Black trousers, clean blouse, low bun, lip balm, nothing more. Her commute from the outskirts of Charlotte into the city took almost an hour, and she always aimed to arrive before 7, always before him. Corbin Ellison, her boss, CEO of Ellison Creative Group, one of the Southeast's most respected marketing firms, known for producing top-tier campaigns for luxury brands, healthcare startups, and even a senator's re-election bid. Corbin had built the company from a borrowed conference room and 2 interns into a 150-person powerhouse. People said he was brilliant, untouchable. Cold. Naraya didn't think he was cold, just focused. He barely spoke unless it was necessary. No fluff, no greetings that didn't matter. She'd once made the mistake of wishing him a happy Monday. He had blinked once, nodded and said, "Let's move on to the Kinsley pitch." Still, she respected him, admired his work ethic. He had no time for nonsense, and oddly, that made her feel safe. She poured herself a mug of office coffee just before 7:10 a.m. and sat at her desk outside his private office. Right on cue, she heard the elevator ding. He walked in, dark grey coat, laptop bag over one shoulder, eyes scanning the hallway but never stopping. "Morning," Naraya said softly. He gave her a nod. Morning. That was enough. When Naraya first got the job, she never imagined she'd last more than a few months. She was 25, freshly moved from a small town outside Greensboro, and carrying the weight of hospital bills like bricks in her backpack. Her resume was neat but forgettable. Her degree in administrative management got her interviews, but her lack of connections got her silence. But when she'd sat across from Corbin during her final interview, something shifted. He had read her resume twice, she could tell. He asked about the gap year between graduation and her first real job. "I was taking care of my mother," she said honestly. "She got sick. I stayed." He didn't say, "I'm sorry to hear that." He didn't ask what illness. He only nodded and wrote something down. Then he looked up and said, "Start Monday." And she did. That was 11 months ago. In that time, Naraya had never arrived late. Never taken a personal call at her desk. Never given anyone a reason to whisper her name in gossip. She learned Corbin's rhythms, how he liked his coffee, 2 creams, no sugar, how he preferred his calendar-structured meetings, no longer than 30 minutes unless it involved international clients, and how he avoided small talk like a plague. He never yelled, never raised his voice, but if she handed him a report with a missing figure, the pause before he handed it back felt louder than any scream. Still, she liked the challenge, and even more, she liked that she didn't have to pretend with him. He didn't need fake smiles. He didn't care about her hair or her shoes. He cared about precision, efficiency, and the results she delivered. And somehow, that made her want to do more. But Naraya was tired. Most days, she ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter while her mother dozed off in front of the TV. Most nights, she fell asleep reading insurance claim forms. The pressure of rent, medication refills, groceries, and utilities pressed hard against her chest. She never let it show. Except for once. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October. She had skipped lunch to wait on hold with the billing department at her mother's clinic. Her stomach growled and her head throbbed. When the call ended with, "Unfortunately, your coverage doesn't extend to this prescription," she buried her face in her hands and sighed. That's when Corbin stepped out of his office. He paused, looked at her, said nothing. She wiped her eyes fast and said, "I'll send the Greenberg deck shortly." He nodded, walked away. The next morning, her paycheck included a raise. Not huge, but enough to cover the new medication. And her benefits? Upgraded. Quietly, without a word. She sat at her desk that day and stared at his office door. He never brought it up, never said he saw her. But she knew. She never forgot it. Still, Naraya reminded herself, gratitude wasn't love. And love wasn't safe. She saw how some of the younger interns stared at Corbin during meetings. The way they laughed too loud at his rare jokes or angled their bodies to catch his attention. He never noticed, or maybe he didn't care. Naraya didn't try. Until something shifted in November. Something small but different. He had come in that morning without his coat. His shirt was slightly wrinkled. No tie. He looked tired. She had placed a fresh cup of coffee on his desk and quietly said, "I hope today's a little kinder than yesterday." For the first time, he looked at her. Really looked. Then he nodded. "Thank you." 2 words. But they stayed with her the whole day. Now, as Christmas approached, the office buzzed with talk of the annual holiday party. It was hosted at a luxury rooftop downtown. Expensive wine, catered hors d'oeuvres, jazz band. The interns were excited. The executives pretended not to care. Naraya planned not to go. She didn't own a red dress. Her heels were 2 years old and hurt after an hour. But then, on the Thursday before the event, she found a handwritten note tucked into her notepad. Mandatory. "You've earned this. Wear red. See." Her fingers trembled. She read it 3 times. She didn't know what it meant. But she went shopping that night, and for the first time in a long time. She let herself wonder. The city's skyline glowed with gold lights and shadows that stretched across the rooftop terrace. Charlotte's December air was crisp but kind, and the soft rhythm of jazz wrapped around the guests like a gentle whisper. Naraya adjusted the strap of her dress and stepped out of the elevator, clutching a small clutch tighter than necessary. Her red gown was simple, modest, but it hugged her figure in the right places. It had taken her 2 hours, 3 stores, and 1 budget compromise to find. She had never worn anything like it. She scanned the room. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter floated from the corner bar. Colleagues milled about, shaking hands, faking laughs. She felt out of place already. And then she saw him. Corbin stood near the edge of the terrace, away from the chatter, nursing a drink and watching the skyline. His suit was dark, tailored, and for once, his tie was missing. The first few buttons of his shirt were undone, and his hair looked like he'd run his hands through it more than once. He looked different, less polished, more human. She stayed near the drinks table, sipping something non-alcoholic and scanning the room again. But every few minutes, her eyes pulled back to him like gravity. And then he looked up, right at her. No smile, no raised eyebrow, just steady, unreadable Corbin. She turned away fast, cheeks burning. But when she turned back, he was walking toward her. "Naraya," he said, voice low. He didn't look at the dress, didn't compliment her. But something in his eyes had changed. They lingered longer, softer. "Sir," she said quietly. He gestured toward the edge of the terrace. "Can I borrow your silence for a moment?" She followed. They stood side by side, overlooking the streetlights and the distant highway. A saxophone played somewhere behind them, but she couldn't focus on anything except the sound of her own breath. "You don't like parties," he said. She glanced at him. "I didn't plan to come, but you're here." She hesitated. "You said it was mandatory." He looked at her, amused. "I rarely write notes." I noticed. He didn't smile, but his eyes held something, a flicker of warmth, a shift. They stood quietly. For once, the silence wasn't awkward. It was full. "Why red?" she asked. Corbin took a sip of his drink. "You wear grey and black like armor. I wanted you to feel like you were allowed to stand out." Her heart stuttered. "I didn't know you noticed what I wore." "I notice everything," he replied. It was then, Not because of the words, but because of how they were said, that Nariah knew something had shifted. He wasn't looking through her anymore. He was looking at her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, not because it was fast, but because every minute felt like too much and not enough. They didn't dance. He didn't touch her. But wherever she stood, his presence wasn't far. When the crowd thinned and the jazz quieted, she headed toward the elevator. Then she felt him behind her. "Don't go home yet," Corbin said. She turned slowly. "Why?" He paused. "Because I'm not ready for the silence to return." Her breath caught. "Corbin." He stepped closer, not touching, not pressuring, just present. "There's a room upstairs," he said. "I sometimes use it when work runs late." "I know." He looked down, then back up. "Will you come with me?" Nariah didn't answer right away. Her heart beat loud in her ears. This wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. But it wasn't simple either. Still, she nodded. The suite was minimal, clean. A glass wall revealed the skyline, and a single lamp lit the space with a soft amber glow. Nariah stood near the window. Corbin removed his jacket and laid it over a chair. Neither of them rushed. They barely spoke. He approached her slowly. "I don't do this," he said quietly. "I don't either." He reached for her hand. They didn't rip clothing. There were no wild moans or cheap whispers. It was nothing like the scenes people imagined. It was slower, warmer, filled with pauses and eyes that searched for permission again and again. When he kissed her, it wasn't with hunger. It was with care. When he touched her, he wasn't taking. He was offering. And when she whispered his name, not Sir, not Mr. Ellison, but Corbin, he closed his eyes like it grounded him. When morning came, she slipped out of bed while he slept. She stood at the window one last time, dressed quietly, and scribbled a note. "Thank you for the silence. I needed it. Nariah." She left it on the nightstand and walked out. She didn't expect him to chase her, and he didn't. That silence, again, said everything. Monday arrived, and the office resumed its rhythm. Corbin was already in when she arrived. He nodded once. She nodded back. No lingering glances, no personal messages. He didn't ask about that night, and she didn't offer anything. She sent calendar invites. He approved marketing budgets. They were back to being professionals. But something was broken inside her. Not in a sad way, just cracked, like a container that could no longer hold what it used to. She would catch herself thinking about the way he looked at her that night, like she was more than an assistant, like he was more than a boss. And the way he didn't stop her when she left, like he was afraid to ask for more. She typed 3 different texts to him that week, erased them all. She reminded herself it was one night. One lapse. One memory to be folded into the drawer of her life and never reopened. Until 5 weeks later, when her stomach turned at the smell of coffee, when she stared at her untouched lunch and realized she wasn't just tired, when the second pink line appeared, and stayed. The pregnancy test lay face down on the bathroom counter. Nariah paced her tiny apartment, palms sweaty, heart drumming like it wanted out of her chest. She had bought the test that morning on her way to work, tucked it deep, into her tote bag beneath folders and receipts, hoping she'd be wrong. She wasn't. Her period was late. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways. Her cravings were strange, and that nauseating smell, coffee, her daily companion for years, now made her gag the second it hit the air. But it wasn't real. Not yet. She needed confirmation. Now that she had it, she felt like her breath had been stolen from her. She returned to the bathroom slowly, flipped the test over, and stared at the result again. Then reached for the second box. Took the second test, waited, prayed for error. Same result. Positive. She sank to the cold tile floor and hugged her knees to her chest. Her mind scattered in every direction. Corbin's face, her mother's oxygen machine, her job, her savings account, and the child. Her child. The child growing inside her from one night of quiet, wordless closeness. a night she had buried beneath routine and silence. She was pregnant, with her boss's baby. That night, Naraya didn't sleep. She lay in bed, one hand over her belly, the other over her mouth to silence the thoughts screaming inside her. Should she tell him? Should she keep working like nothing happened? Could she raise a child alone? She opened her phone, typed a message. Naraya, I need to talk to you. It's important. She stared at it for minutes, thumb hovering over send. She deleted it. Tried again. Naraya. Something came up. Can we meet outside the office? Deleted again. By 2 a.m., her drafts folder was full of unsent messages, each version either too vague or too desperate. She gave up and curled tighter beneath her blanket. By sunrise, she had made a decision. She couldn't stay. Her resignation was typed quickly but reviewed 10 times. Corbin, thank you for the opportunity. I've learned more than I can put into words. It's time for me to begin a new chapter, and I hope our paths cross again under kinder circumstances. Respectfully, Naraya Lane. No mention of pregnancy, no explanation, just quiet closure. She printed the letter and slid it into a crisp envelope. At 6:45 a.m., she arrived at the office like always, left the letter on his desk like a professional, packed her things in silence. By 7:10, she was gone. She didn't even take her last paycheck. She took the Greyhound bus back home. Her mother, weakened but still sharp, opened the door in her robe. You didn't say you were visiting. Naraya stepped inside, hugged her tightly and whispered, I'm staying. For a while. She didn't mention the baby that day. Not yet. They sat quietly on the porch that evening, the sky above them painted in soft shades of plum and grey. Naraya sipped water slowly and placed a hand over her still flat stomach. You're not alone, she whispered, and meant it both ways. 2 weeks later, she sat in the small clinic outside of town. The nurse smiled at her gently. You're 8 weeks along. Naraya stared at the tiny monitor as the nurse pointed at the flickering dot on the screen. There's the heartbeat. She blinked fast. Already? It's strong. She covered her mouth, not to hide the tears, but to hold the moment. There it was. Life. Proof. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A heartbeat. A future. She left the clinic with a printed sonogram folded into her journal. At home, she tucked it into a drawer with her resignation letter and the note he once left her, where read. She didn't cry, but something inside her shifted again. The months that followed weren't easy. Morning sickness hit hard. Her energy dropped. She picked up part-time work at a local accounting office. Quiet place, slower pace, enough to cover groceries and vitamins. Her mother asked questions, but didn't press. She'd lived long enough to know when a daughter needs space to speak in her own time. By the second trimester, Naraya finally told her. They sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of ginger tea between them. I'm having a baby, she said softly. Her mother nodded slowly. Do I know the father? Naraya hesitated. He doesn't know. Her mother didn't gasp, didn't judge. She only reached across the table and took Naraya's hand. You do what brings you peace, she said, not what others expect. That night, Naraya slept better than she had in weeks. She didn't think about Corbin often after that. When she did, it wasn't with anger, more like wondering. Would he have wanted to know? Would he have helped? Would he have asked her to stay? But the truth always circled back. He had let her leave, without question, without a word. Maybe that was answer enough. The baby kicked for the first time during a trip to the grocery store. Naraya froze near the freezer aisle, her hands on her belly, eyes wide. There it was, a tiny flutter. Then again, like a whisper from inside. She smiled. I hear you, she whispered. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight alone. The baby came early, not dangerously early, but enough to throw her off guard. It was a rainy Tuesday night. Her water broke before she even reached the clinic. Hours of labor. No epidural. No partner pacing the hallway. Just her, her mother, and a kind nurse named Lila who held her hand and told her she was stronger than she thought. And when it was over, when she finally heard that first cry, she looked down at the baby placed on her chest and froze. Hazel eyes, quiet stare, just like his father. She named him Ezra. Ezra Lane, no hyphen, no middle name, no clues to his origin. But every time he blinked up at her with those eyes, Nariah felt Corbin's presence like a ghost. And yet, she smiled through the pain, because Ezra wasn't a mistake. He was her beginning. Ezra was a quiet baby, not silent, but thoughtful, if a newborn could be that. He hardly cried unless he needed something. When Nariah fed him, his eyes followed her steadily, as if memorizing her face. When she rocked him to sleep, he never fussed long. It was as if he understood she didn't have extra energy to waste. He was her calm in a life that still had chaos hiding in the corners. She'd taken a leave from the accounting office. It didn't pay maternity benefits, but the manager was kind. Her mother watched Ezra when she needed to step out, and her aunt occasionally stopped by with groceries and warm encouragement. Still, the bills didn't pause. She clipped coupons, applied for supplemental food assistance, took a remote data entry gig when Ezra turned 3 weeks old. Late nights, headphones in, baby on her lap. She didn't complain, because every time Ezra smiled in his sleep, she remembered why. Corbin hadn't tried to find her. He didn't send an email, didn't call, didn't show up. And a part of her was thankful. She didn't have to explain anything, didn't have to answer the questions she wasn't ready to face. But another part of her, the part that used to draft texts and delete them, wondered if he even noticed she was gone. Had he read her resignation letter? Did he ever stand in his office, look at her empty desk and feel something? She shook those thoughts away every time they surfaced, because it didn't matter now. Ezra was here, and he needed all of her. By the time Ezra turned 1, he had 2 teeth, could stand on wobbly legs, and had developed a laugh so contagious it could lift the mood of an entire room. He loved music, any kind, gospel, jazz, pop jingles from commercials. He'd bounce and sway until Nariah had to laugh. Even her mother, in her moments of pain and fatigue, would grin and clap along. They were a small family, but they were a complete one. One morning, Nariah stood in front of the mirror while Ezra napped. She stared at her reflection, still adjusting to the subtle changes. Her body had changed. Her eyes carried more weight. Her smile was quieter now, but her heart, it beat steadier. She was no longer just surviving. She was building something. Then the letter came. A former colleague, Jenna from HR, sent her a belated birthday card with a short message inside. ECG is growing fast. Corbin's still his usual quiet self. Miss seeing your face in the morning. Let me know if you're ever in the city. Nariah stared at the name. Corbin. She hadn't said it out loud in over a year, not even to Ezra. He was your father when her mother asked, but in her own head, he was still just Corbin, the man who once looked at her, like he saw past her armor, then let her walk out of his life without a word. She never replied to Jenna. But something stirred, a nudge, an ache. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from her past. A few weeks later, the small firm she worked for was invited to a regional business conference in Raleigh. Her manager, impressed with her composure and attention to detail, offered her the chance to represent the company. You deserve the spotlight, he said. You've held this place together through tax season and maternity leave. She accepted, not because of the opportunity, but because something inside her whispered, it's time. She prepared for the trip carefully, left Ezra with her mother and aunt for 2 days, packed light, pressed her clothes, printed extra copies of the firm's presentation folders, and, for the first time in years, applied a little lipstick before boarding the bus. She didn't know if she would see him, didn't plan on it, but she didn't avoid the possibility either. The hotel was modern, glass everywhere, marble floors. chandeliers that looked like art installations. Nariah checked in, received her name badge, and headed to the conference hall. As she crossed the lobby, someone held the elevator door open for her. She stepped in. He was already inside. Her breath caught. Corbin, he hadn't changed much. Still tall, still composed, still in charcoal suits that made him look like he belonged in boardrooms and billboards. But his jaw was slightly more angular, his eyes deeper, and the silence around him felt heavier now. He turned as the door closed. Their eyes met. He didn't blink, neither did she. The elevator ride lasted 10 floors. Neither spoke. When the doors opened, he let her walk out first. She kept moving, heart hammering in her chest. But later that night, near the fountain outside the hotel, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. He stood there, under soft lights and an even softer sky. "You disappeared," he said. His voice was quieter than she remembered. Not cold, just controlled. "I had to," she said simply. He nodded, stepped a little closer. "Was it something I did?" She shook her head. "No, it was something I became." He tilted his head. "I don't understand." She exhaled slowly. "You're not supposed to. Not yet." Then, as if fate had been holding its breath, a cry rang out down the hallway. Ezra's cry. Her aunt had come down to meet her, holding the toddler in her arms. Corbin turned toward the sound and froze. Ezra stared back at him. Hazel eyes. Same shape. Same expression. Same silence. Corbin didn't speak, didn't step forward, didn't ask a single question. Because in that one glance, he knew. Have you ever carried a secret you thought you'd take to your grave, only for fate to reveal it for you? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to like and share this story if it touched something real in you. Corbin didn't move. Ezra's cry faded into soft whimpers as Nariah's aunt gently bounced him on her hip, not yet realizing what had just passed between the two adults. But Nariah saw it, felt it. A weight had dropped in the air between her and Corbin. Heavy, undeniable, irreversible. Their son had his eyes, same hazel, flecked with gold, same quiet way of watching everything. Corbin blinked once, slowly, as if trying to reboot a system inside himself. His gaze never left the toddler, not even to look at her. Nariah stepped forward. "I didn't plan for you to see him." He finally turned toward her. "But he's mine." It wasn't a question. She nodded. Corbin looked down at the pavement for a long moment. When he looked back up, his voice was even. "How old is he?" 17 months. More silence. Her aunt stepped closer, sensing tension. "This your colleague?" she asked casually, eyes darting between them. Nariah gave a tight smile. "Just someone I used to work with." Her aunt seemed to accept that and turned to Ezra. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's give Mommy a minute." She walked off, leaving Nariah and Corbin alone in the glow of hotel lights and unfinished emotions. Corbin let out a breath. "You left without a word." "I had to," she replied. "I didn't know what you'd say, or if you'd even care." "I cared." The way he said it wasn't angry, just tired, as if he was still processing what he'd just seen. "Then why didn't you stop me?" He looked at her, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, he looked vulnerable. "Because I didn't think I deserved to." The conference moved around them. People passed, voices echoed, laughter rose from the cocktail lounge nearby, but none of it touched them. Corbin slid his hands into his pockets and looked up at the night sky. "You should have told me." Nariah swallowed hard. "I know. I missed everything. I know." He turned to her again. "Were you afraid of me?" "No," she said softly. "I was afraid of becoming something you didn't ask for." His eyes narrowed. "He's not something. He's someone. And he's mine too." She didn't argue. She didn't need to, because deep down, she had known he would say that. Maybe not in those exact words, but she knew Corbin wasn't the kind of man to run once he saw the truth. Still, it terrified her. That night, Naria lay in her hotel bed, staring at the ceiling fan, mind racing. Ezra was asleep next to her, curled up with a stuffed elephant he wouldn't nap without. His small hand rested on her arm, and every few minutes he shifted in his dreams. Corbin hadn't asked to see him again, hadn't demanded answers, but the look on his face hadn't left her mind. He wasn't angry, he wasn't cold. He looked lost, and maybe, just maybe, so was she. She had built a whole world where Corbin didn't exist, because it was easier than wondering if he could ever fit into it. Now, the door she had locked was open, and she didn't know what came next. The next morning, as she stepped into the lobby with Ezra in her arms, she spotted Corbin already there. He was seated on a bench by the hotel cafe, sipping his usual plain black coffee, a bag beside him. He looked up as soon as he saw her. Naria stopped walking. Ezra stirred against her chest and opened his eyes. Hazel locked with Hazel again. Corbin stood and walked toward them. Not rushed, not stiff, just calm. "I booked a private table," he said, "just outside the cafe." She looked down at Ezra, then nodded. The patio was quiet, set with 2 chairs and a high chair the hostess kindly provided. Corbin pulled it closer and gestured for Ezra. Naria hesitated. Ezra clung to her for a moment, but when Corbin extended his hand, slow, respectful, Ezra looked at it, then reached back. She passed him over gently. Ezra sat in the high chair, blinking at this new man who looked just like him. Corbin watched his son, their son, for a long moment before speaking. "He has your mouth." Naria smiled slightly. "But your eyes. He's perfect." That word hit her deeper than expected. She nodded. "He is." Corbin turned to her. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked down at her coffee. "I was scared." "Of what?" "Of changing your life. Of being seen as a complication. Of being resented later." "You thought I'd resent my own child?" "I didn't know what you'd do, Corbin. You barely said more than 3 sentences a day back then. And when I left, you let me—" He paused, his voice lower now. "Because I was afraid." Her eyes flicked up. "I thought if I stopped you, it would make things worse. I thought maybe you needed distance. Maybe I crossed a line I shouldn't have." "You didn't." "I know that now," he said quietly. "But it took losing something I didn't even know I had." Ezra let out a small noise, not a cry, just a babble, and reached for Corbin's sleeve. Corbin looked down, gently offering his finger. Ezra grasped it tightly. Naria blinked quickly. "He doesn't usually warm up to people like that." "He knows me," Corbin said, his voice unsteady. And maybe he did. Maybe Ezra recognized something in Corbin that went deeper than biology. A rhythm. A silence. A steadiness that matched his own. Corbin leaned back slightly. "I don't expect answers today. I want to be part of his life." Naria nodded. "Okay, okay. I don't know how we'll do it yet, but yes, you should know him, and he should know you." The silence that followed wasn't tense this time. It was full of unspoken relief. And a new beginning. Corbin didn't try to take over. He didn't bombard Naria with questions about Ezra's first word, his favorite food, or his sleeping schedule. He didn't overreach. Instead, he listened. Carefully. Intentionally. That morning on the hotel patio, after their first real conversation since she left, he asked one simple question: "What does Ezra need right now?" Naria blinked, unsure of how to answer. She'd expected defensiveness. Control. Maybe even a plan to insert himself immediately, but Corbin didn't move like most men. He didn't come with declarations or demands. He waited, and that gave her enough space to think clearly. "Stability," she said softly. "He needs to feel safe. He's only known one version of life. I don't want to shake it up too fast." Corbin nodded slowly. "Then, let's start small." They agreed to meet later that afternoon at the children's garden outside the city museum. Naria's aunt came too, not because she didn't trust Corbin, but because she wanted to see everything with her own eyes. Corbin arrived 10 minutes early. Bought Ezra a small plush lion from the gift shop. Nothing flashy, just soft, with stitched eyes and a ribbon around the neck. Ezra clutched it instantly. At first, he stayed close to Nariah, but slowly he wandered further, toward the fountain, the butterfly mural, the tiny wooden bridge in the garden's center. Corbin followed at a respectful distance, watched, then knelt beside Ezra when he pointed at a red flower and said, "Mama." "No, baby, that's not Mama." Nariah laughed gently. "That's a tulip." Corbin smiled. "Smart kid." "He is." They sat together on the garden bench while Ezra played with bubbles, his tiny hands chasing foam as it floated in the air. Nariah folded her arms. "He looks more like you every day." "I saw it the second I looked at him," Corbin said. "It was like looking back at myself, but better." She turned to him. "You weren't ready back then." "I know," he said. "I was scared to ask for anything. I would have given more than you think, but I get why you didn't ask." She watched Ezra tumble gently into the grass, giggling as he tried to catch his shadow. "We were two people hiding behind silence." Corbin nodded. "Not anymore." They exchanged numbers before parting ways. No pressure. No timelines. Just a shared understanding. They were stepping into uncharted territory together. For Ezra. Back in her hotel room, Nariah sat quietly while Ezra napped. She scrolled through old photos on her phone. Blurry ultrasound pictures, his first smile, the video of him waddling through the kitchen for the first time. He had done all those things without a father. And now, that might change. She felt something unfamiliar tug at her chest. Hope. Over the next month, Corbin called every 2 days. Not long conversations. Sometimes just, "How's he sleeping?" Or, "Can I send him some books?" Or, "What's his favorite animal this week?" Sometimes, he asked Nariah how she was. He never made it about himself. And that, more than anything, earned her trust again. Ezra began recognizing his voice. When Nariah played a short video message from Corbin one evening, Ezra pointed and said, "Dada?" She froze. He'd never heard that word before. She hadn't taught it. But he said it, clear as day, without hesitation. Her heart clenched. It was time. 2 weeks later, Corbin made his first visit to their small home in North Carolina. He brought a new high chair and a basket of groceries. Nothing extravagant, just essentials. Diapers, fruits, a few toys. Nariah's mother raised an eyebrow, but welcomed him in with a firm handshake and a long, assessing look. He passed. That weekend, they cooked dinner together. Corbin chopping vegetables, Nariah making cornbread, Ezra waddling between them like a proud supervisor. After dinner, they sat on the porch. Ezra fell asleep in Corbin's arms, and for the first time, Nariah saw a man who wasn't just wealthy or powerful or composed. She saw a father. A real one, present, patient, ready. As stars filled the sky, Nariah leaned back and said quietly, "I thought I'd have to do this alone forever." "You don't," Corbin replied. "Not if you'll let me stay." She looked at him. "This isn't about us. Not yet." "I know," he said. "But being his father is—" She nodded. "Then be that. I will—" And in the hush that followed, the silence between them didn't feel like a wall anymore. It felt like the beginning of something new, something worth building. Corbin's visits became routine. He never imposed, never showed up without checking. But each time he arrived, it was as if a missing piece fell quietly into place. Ezra recognized his knock before the door even opened. "Dada," he'd shout, running in his unbalanced toddler stride. He didn't know the full meaning of the word, but he knew it meant joy. Security, something warm, something that stayed. Corbin would scoop him up gently, not like someone catching a child, but like someone returning home. Nariah watched all of it quietly. The first few visits, she stayed guarded, observed, took mental notes of how Corbin interacted with Ezra, how patient he was when Ezra spilled things or threw tantrums. He never raised his voice. He never flinched. He only got down to Ezra's level, locked eyes with him, and said things like, "That's not okay," or "You can try again." No threats, no performance, just quiet parenting. And Nariah couldn't help but feel something shift inside her. One Saturday afternoon, Corbin offered to take Ezra to the park. Just the two of them. Nariah hesitated. Her protective instinct kicked in hard. But Ezra had grown attached, and truthfully, Corbin had earned the trust. She packed the diaper bag, added wipes, snacks, a spare shirt, and gave instructions like it was a military operation. No juice after 5. He gets cranky. Don't forget, he hates grass on his feet. He loves slides, but only the green one, not the blue. Don't ask me why. Corbin nodded through all of it, a small smile on his lips. Got it. You sure? I've got him. Nariah handed Ezra over, kissed his cheek, and stood on the porch as they pulled off. For the first time in 2 years, she stood in an empty house, alone. It was strange, quiet, heavy in some places, but peaceful too. That evening, they returned with stories. Ezra ran to her with the kind of excitement only toddlers could store up. "Mama, bird, Dada show." Corbin walked in behind him, grass stains on his jeans and a paper crown. On his head, likely from some arts and crafts kiosk at the park. "I forgot the no-grass rule," he admitted. Nariah tried not to laugh. "You're lucky he's smiling." Corbin handed her a small paper bracelet Ezra had made. "This is yours." She held it like it was made of gold. Ezra crawled into her lap and curled up, falling asleep within minutes. Corbin sat on the floor nearby, stretching his legs out, his back against the couch. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. But then he looked up and said something that caught her completely off guard. "You were always more than just my assistant." Nariah's heart thudded. She didn't answer immediately. She traced the curve of Ezra's back with her palm and looked toward the window instead. "Why didn't you say anything back then?" she asked softly. "I didn't want to cross a line." She turned to him. "You invited me to your suite." He met her eyes. "That night, I wasn't thinking like a CEO. I was thinking like a man who finally found someone who didn't expect him to be perfect." She swallowed. He continued, "I didn't say anything because I was afraid of what I was feeling. And when you left, I thought maybe you felt the same fear." "I didn't," she said. "I know that now." The silence stretched between them, warm but heavy. "You once told me to wear red," she said, almost smiling. "You said it so I'd stop hiding." Corbin nodded. "And you were stunning. But I didn't just notice the dress." "What did you notice?" "You," he said. "You carried everything with grace, and I knew, even then, I didn't deserve your story." Nariah's eyes softened. "You don't have to deserve it," she whispered. "You just have to honor it." He nodded. "I want to. Every day." They didn't kiss that night. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, just Ezra asleep on her chest, and Corbin sitting on the floor, finally, not as her boss, but as the man who stayed. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, lighting up the living room with a golden hush. Ezra stirred first, stretching across Nariah's lap, then burrowed deeper into her arms. His tiny hands gripped the fabric of her robe, unwilling to let go of the warmth he knew best. Corbin was still on the couch floor, head tilted back, eyes closed. He had stayed. That fact lingered. It had been nearly 2 years since someone stayed. Nariah gently laid Ezra in his crib, covered him, and turned to find Corbin sitting upright now, arms resting on his knees. "Coffee?" she offered. He nodded. "Please." They moved through the morning in a way that felt unspoken but synced. Like people who had shared more than time, they'd shared silence, choices, pain, and now the space between them didn't carry awkwardness. It carried awareness. Nariah placed a mug in front of him at the kitchen table. Black, no sugar. He raised a brow. "Still remember?" "I never forgot." Over breakfast, they talked about small things. Ezra's appetite, new words he'd picked up, Naraya mentioned she was thinking about night classes to finish a certification in project coordination, something flexible, remote-friendly. Corbin listened closely. If you need help with tuition, she raised her hand. Let me earn that, please. He didn't argue, just nodded. I'll help in other ways. You already are. There was something in his gaze then. Not pity, not guilt, but admiration. A kind of quiet awe for the woman who had carried so much without ever asking for help. I never knew how much strength lived in you, he said softly. She shrugged. I didn't know either. Until I had to. Later that day, Corbin walked Ezra down the street in a second-hand stroller Naraya's aunt had passed down. They stopped to point at a dog in a neighbor's yard, then a passing motorcycle, then a butterfly. Naraya followed a few steps behind, arms crossed, observing. He was gentle with Ezra, present, patient, and Ezra trusted him completely. As they turned toward home, Ezra reached his arms up without hesitation, and Corbin lifted him, settling the toddler on his shoulders. Ezra laughed, little feet bouncing against Corbin's chest. The sight was so simple, so human, it nearly broke her. Because in all her planning, all her decisions to do it alone, she had never planned. For this, the sight of the man she once feared might reject their child, now carrying that child like he was the most important part of his world. When they returned home, Naraya excused herself to the kitchen, needing a minute. She leaned against the sink, gripping the counter. Emotions tangled in her chest, gratitude, fear, longing, pride, guilt. Corbin walked in, holding Ezra on his hip. He's asleep again, he whispered. She turned. Their eyes met. And this time, neither of them looked away. You're doing something to me, she said quietly. Corbin stepped closer. What do you mean? You're showing up. And I didn't plan for that. I didn't plan to be absent. But you were. He nodded. And I'll regret it for a long time. But I'm here now, and not because I feel obligated. Then why? Because I want to be here. He looked down, then back up. For him. And for you. Her throat tightened. She stepped back slightly, needing space, but not distance. This can't be like before, she said. I'm not the girl who left your office crying in the dark. I'm someone's mother now. I don't take risks lightly. You're not a risk to me, Corbin said. You're the most certain thing I've ever walked away from. He paused. And the only one I want a second chance with. The air between them stilled, and then Ezra cried out from the other room. They both smiled. Naraya exhaled, saved by the baby. Corbin chuckled. He's got timing. That night, Corbin didn't stay over. He kissed Ezra's forehead, thanked her mother politely, and told Naraya he'd call the next day. As he stepped outside, Naraya followed him to the porch. Corbin, he turned. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For seeing him. I always saw you, he said. And now? Now I want to keep seeing everything. She didn't sleep much that night, because for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a burden to carry alone. It felt like something to share. Corbin didn't disappear. He called every evening, even if just to hear Ezra babble on the phone. Sometimes they FaceTimed, and Ezra would shove toys at the camera, showing off his latest obsession. A plastic car, a lopsided building block tower, a half-eaten cookie. But it wasn't just about Ezra anymore. The calls drifted longer. How was your day? Corbin would ask. Busy, Naraya replied once, brushing flour off her apron. I've been baking banana bread all day. Ezra's obsessed with it. Send me a slice, she smiled. Only if you earn it. That was their new rhythm. Soft, steady, no promises, but no avoidance either. And that was more than she expected. 3 weeks later, Corbin invited her and Ezra to visit him in Charlotte. Not for a formal meeting, not at his office, but at a family-friendly museum near uptown. No pressure, just an open invitation. She almost said no. The idea of re-entering his world, the world she had walked away from, stirred up more nerves than she wanted to admit. But Ezra deserved the chance. And truthfully, so did she. They arrived late Saturday morning. Corbin was waiting by the museum doors, dressed down in jeans and a navy pullover, holding 2 tickets in one hand and a small backpack slung over his shoulder. Nariah smiled as she approached. Prepared, I see. He raised the backpack. Snacks, wipes, pull-ups, juice boxes. I'm learning. Ezra ran to him. Corbin scooped him up without hesitation, holding him like it had always been that way. And maybe it always should have been. The museum was a wonderland for toddlers. Interactive exhibits, lights, tunnels, play kitchens, giant foam blocks. Ezra was wide-eyed from start to finish, pulling both of them in different directions every 5 minutes. Corbin didn't miss a beat. He crawled through the mini tunnels with Ezra, helped him slide down the plastic ramp. Clapped after every round of block stacking, like he was watching the Olympics. At one point, Nariah stood back and watched them from a distance. 2 matching profiles, same hazel eyes, same furrowed brows, same deliberate quietness. And then Corbin did something that surprised her. He looked over his shoulder, found her in the crowd and smiled. A full, warm smile. Not the polite one she'd seen in meetings. Not the closed-lip version from their old days. But something real. Something that said, I see you, and I'm glad you're here. She smiled back. After lunch at the cafe attached to the museum, they sat at an outdoor table. While Ezra napped in the stroller, cheeks flushed from non-stop joy. Corbin broke the silence. I want to do this more often. Nariah sipped her lemonade. Museum trips? Everything. School runs, doctor visits, bedtime stories. She looked at him carefully. That's a lot. I'm not asking for everything at once, but I'd like to earn my place. You're already in his life. I want to be in yours too. She didn't speak for a while. The sun glowed soft against her skin. Her fingers tapped gently against the rim of her glass. You know, she said slowly, I don't think I ever let myself imagine what a future with you looked like. Why not? Because we didn't even have a past. Corbin leaned in slightly. Then, let's start now. Start what? Something real. No labels, no pressure, just 2 people who share a son, who happen to still care about each other. Her eyes didn't flinch. Do you care about me? His answer was immediate. Yes. They returned to the museum parking lot in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was full of questions neither of them needed to rush. When he helped her buckle Ezra into the car seat, Corbin paused and looked at her one last time. If I call tonight, will you answer? Nariah nodded, and when she got home, she did. That night, Ezra went down early, and Nariah sat on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, her voice softer than usual. They talked for an hour, about nothing and everything, and for the first time since their one night together, she didn't feel like a woman running from a mistake. She felt like a woman, beginning again. Corbin started visiting every other weekend. He never missed a call, never forgot to ask about Ezra's milestones. And when he wasn't in town, he'd send little surprises, children's books, a music toy, a new rain jacket just in time for spring. He asked first, never imposed. I saw this and thought of him. He'd text Nariah, followed by a picture and a simple, would this help? She never expected that kind of gentleness from him, not from the man who once gave clipped answers in meetings and walked through deadlines like storms. But fatherhood softened Corbin in all the right places, and it showed. One Sunday evening, while Ezra napped on the couch, Nariah stood at the sink rinsing plates. Corbin stood behind her, drying each one without being asked. The house smelled of baked chicken and roasted vegetables. The TV hummed quietly from the living room. Rain tapped gently at the window. You've made a beautiful life here, Corbin said, handing her another plate. Nariah glanced over her shoulder. It's not much. It's enough, he said. It feels full. She paused. Sometimes it feels lonely. He didn't respond immediately. Then, do you want it to be? She placed the plate down. I don't know what I want. I do. Corbin reached into the dish rack, pulled a towel, and stepped closer. I want to know you again, he said. Not the woman I once admired from behind my office desk. Not the assistant who kept things running. I want to know Nariah, the mother. The woman who chose courage when it would have been easier to hide. Nariah didn't move. Is this about guilt? She asked. Because you weren't there. No, he said. It's about regret, for not realizing what I had when I had it, and hope that maybe I have a second chance now. She turned toward him, close enough to feel the warmth between them, close enough to remember what his breath felt like against her collarbone that one night. But this time, there was no rush, no need to fill silence with touch, just space and truth. Corbin, he waited. I'm still healing. You're not a bandage. I don't want to be. And I'm not looking for a perfect picture. I'm not offering one. He stepped back just enough to give her room to breathe. Then he smiled. You're the most honest person I've ever met. She smiled back. That used to scare you. It still does, but I'm tired of pretending not to want things that scare me. That night, after Ezra woke up from his nap, they all curled on the couch watching a cartoon about a bear who wanted to fly. Ezra dozed off again mid-episode, head on Nariah's chest, feet in Corbin's lap. Corbin didn't move. His hand rested on Ezra's leg, his thumb brushing absent-mindedly over the child's sock. Nariah caught herself looking, not just at him, but through him, into the possibility of something more. Later, when Corbin stood to leave, she walked him to the porch. Rain still fell, gentler now. They stood under the awning in the dim light. Drive safe, she said. He hesitated, then asked, Can I hug you? She nodded. His arms wrapped around her slowly, firmly, as if making a silent promise. She didn't pull away, not quickly, not fully. After he left, she stood on the porch long after his car disappeared. Her heart beat slower now, not from anxiety, from knowing, for the first time in years, that she wasn't doing this alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to. Corbin didn't call the next morning. He showed up. Nariah had just finished buttoning Ezra's jacket when the knock came. She opened the door, startled. Corbin stood there, holding 2 paper bags and a drink tray. Breakfast, he said. And no, I'm not staying long. Ezra squealed, Dada. Corbin bent and lifted him with ease, balancing the tray with one hand. You up for pancakes, little man? Nariah stepped aside, arms crossed but lips twitching. You drove 2 hours for pancakes? I drove 2 hours for a moment, he said, walking in. And your banana bread. Don't act like it's not worth it. She rolled her eyes. Smooth. He placed the food on the counter, kissed Ezra's forehead, then looked at Nariah. 15 minutes, I promise. They ate together, not around a dining table, but standing at the kitchen. Island. Ezra perched on the counter in front of his tiny plate. Corbin watched him closely, every expression, every bite. Nariah sipped her coffee and studied Corbin instead. How are things at ECG? She asked casually. Corbin shrugged. Busy, but manageable. You still live alone? He nodded. Still don't own a toaster. She smiled. Some things never change. He leaned on the counter. Some things do. The tone in his voice was low, sure, the way it always was when he was speaking truth and nothing else. After breakfast, he helped clean up, wiped down Ezra's face, and started to leave. I'll call you later, he said, already stepping onto the porch. Nariah watched him. Corbin, he turned. You could stay next weekend, she said quietly. If you want. A pause. Like, overnight? She nodded once. He studied her face. Not for hesitation, but for sincerity. Only if you're sure. I am. He exhaled. Then I'll bring a real suitcase this time. That weekend changed everything. Corbin didn't sleep on the couch, but he didn't sleep in her bed either. He stayed in the guest room, with the door slightly cracked, in case Ezra stirred. When Nariah walked past once around 2 a.m., she peeked in. He was wide awake, scrolling slowly on his phone, one hand resting across his chest. He looked up. Their eyes met. Neither said a word. But something passed between them. Not urgency, not need, but comfort, the kind people rarely found. Saturday morning, Nariah stepped out of the shower to find Corbin making breakfast. Ezra stood beside him on a stool, stirring pancake batter with exaggerated movements and lots of flour everywhere. "Chef in training?" she asked. "He insisted," Corbin said, brushing flour off Ezra's ear. "Apparently I'm not allowed to flip the pancakes without his approval." Nariah walked over and handed Corbin a towel. Their fingers brushed, lightly, briefly. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. They spent the rest of the day walking around the local market, picking out fruits, letting Ezra choose a toy truck. Corbin paid without making a show of it. He carried the bags without being asked. He existed in their world without disrupting it. That night, after Ezra was asleep and the dishes were done, they sat on the porch in matching silence. Fireflies blinked across the yard. A dog barked faintly in the distance. "Would you ever move back to Charlotte?" Corbin asked. Nariah shook her head. "Not now." "Because of work?" "Because this house is safe. It's small, but it's ours. Ezra knows the corners. My mother's nearby. My peace lives here." He nodded slowly. "Would you ever move out of Charlotte?" she asked. Corbin hesitated. "I'd never thought about it until now." She turned toward him. "Now?" He looked at her. "Now, I think about it all the time." Sunday mornings used to mean Ezra climbing into Nariah's bed at dawn, sticky fingers and cereal crumbs in tow. Now, they meant 3 sets of footsteps in the kitchen. Laughter echoing off the cabinets. Corbin humming to himself while flipping eggs. Ezra sitting on the counter beside his favorite grown-up, no longer just mommy. "Dada! Look," Ezra said, holding up his orange slice like a prize. Corbin took a mock-serious bite from it. 5-star fruit. Ezra beamed. Nariah sipped her tea, leaning against the frame of the doorway. Her robe was loosely tied, curls pulled into a bun. And for once, she didn't rush to clean or organize or fix anything. She just watched 2 of the most important people in her world being themselves. No tension, no explaining, just living. Later that afternoon, while Ezra napped, they sat on the porch again, Nariah, his knees tucked under her in the chair, Corbin nursing a glass of iced tea. "You're getting good at this," she said. "At what?" "This." He raised a brow. "Showing up." Corbin tilted his head. "Is that your way of saying I passed the test?" Nariah chuckled. "You haven't run yet." "Not planning to." She studied him, quietly. "You know, I used to pray Ezra wouldn't look like you." That caught him off guard. "Why?" "Because I didn't want to be reminded." "Of what?" "Of how quickly you let me go." The silence that followed wasn't defensive. It was heavy. Honest. "I let you go because I didn't know what to do with something that felt real," Corbin said. "I was a man who built everything with control. You broke that." "I didn't want to." "I'm glad you did." Nariah looked down at her hands. "Do you love him?" Corbin nodded without hesitation. "With everything in me." "Do you love me?" He paused, not because he didn't know, but because he knew too deeply to toss it out carelessly. "Yes, even if I don't love you back yet." He nodded again. "That doesn't scare me." "Good," she whispered, "because I'm still figuring out what love looks like now." That evening, she walked him to his car. Ezra clung to Corbin's neck, unwilling to let go. "I'll see you next weekend," Corbin promised, kissing his son's cheek. Nariah stood to the side, arms crossed, quietly emotional. Corbin turned to her. "I'll text when I get home." She nodded. He leaned forward, slow, unassuming, and kissed her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. And then he left. Inside, Nariah stared at the empty doorway. Ezra tugged her hand. She picked him up, held him tight, and whispered, "Maybe this time, we both get to be chosen." Have you ever had someone re-enter your life? Not with words, but with presence. Do you believe people can change, not through promises, but by showing up? If this chapter touched something in you, drop a comment below. Like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and make sure you subscribe, because the next chapter will stay with you. Nariah had always been a realist. Plans, budgets, boundaries. She was the kind of woman who made grocery lists by aisle and double-checked Ezra's daycare snacks twice before packing them. But lately she'd been catching herself daydreaming, waking up before Ezra, scrolling through texts from Corbin that didn't ask for updates, just said things like, "Morning. You okay?" Or "Thinking of you." No reason. Just am. Simple, gentle, intentional. And those messages made her heart stutter more than the grand gestures she used to think were necessary to prove love. That week, Corbin offered to pick Ezra up from daycare for the first time. "You don't have to," Nariah told him. "I want to," he replied. "Let me be useful." She gave him the address, instructions, and an extra change of clothes for Ezra, just in case. Then she waited, half expecting a call that he got lost or Ezra didn't cooperate. Instead, she received a photo. Ezra, in his booster seat in Corbin's car, holding a chocolate chip cookie and smiling like he won the lottery. Text attached, "We made a stop. Bribery works. He's happy." Nariah stared at the photo longer than she should have. Not because of the cookie, but because she could see something behind Ezra's joy, the man in the driver's seat. Soft smile. Hand on the wheel. Fatherhood etched into every quiet detail. When they got home, Ezra ran in shouting, "Mama, cookie! Dada say yes!" Nariah raised an eyebrow at Corbin. "Dada?" Corbin grinned. "I didn't coach it, I promise." She crossed her arms. "You gave him sugar before dinner." "I regret nothing." Ezra was already climbing onto the couch, cookie crumbs trailing behind him like confetti. Corbin stepped into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. He's good company. He's exhausting. Still good company. They stood there for a moment, the noise of cartoons in the background. Then Corbin said something she didn't expect. "Let me take you out." Nariah blinked. Out? A real date. Just us. Her instinct bristled. "Why now?" "Because I've shown up as a father. But I want to show up as a man who never stopped thinking about you." She hesitated, not because she didn't want it, but because she did, and that scared her more than she liked to admit. That night, after Ezra was asleep, she called her mother. "I think I'm falling for him," she said. Her mother was quiet for a long beat. "Again?" "No, not again. This time feels earned, then let him earn it." Nariah closed her eyes. "But what if it breaks again?" Her mother's voice was soft. "Then at least it broke while you were being brave." She said yes, to the date, to the next step, to the possibility that this wasn't just some CO parenting fairy tale playing out temporarily. They planned for the following Friday, just dinner, nothing fancy. Corbin said he'd book a sitter and drive down again. She didn't ask if he meant it. He just showed up. Friday came like a quiet drum roll. Nariah spent most of the day cleaning a house that didn't need cleaning, then stood in front of her closet for an hour, debating between a navy wrap dress and a simple cream blouse. She settled on the navy. It hugged her waist, complemented her skin, and didn't feel like she was trying too hard. It also happened to be the same shade she wore the night she resigned. But tonight, she wasn't walking away. She was walking into something. She just didn't know what. Corbin arrived on time. He wore a slate-grey button-down, sleeves rolled to the forearms, no tie. He held a bouquet of soft yellow tulips, not roses, not drama. Just something that said, "I remembered." "You wore navy," he said with a smile, offering the flowers. She tilted her head. And you remembered tulips. You mentioned them once. She took the bouquet and let the moment breathe. You ready? He asked. Nariah glanced back at the living room, where her aunt sat on the couch beside Ezra, flipping through a picture book. I think so, she said. Then she locked the door behind her. They didn't go far, just a small bistro tucked near the old downtown strip. The kind of place with candles on the table and music low enough you had to lean in to hear. Corbin held the door, pulled out her chair, never once checked his phone. You look beautiful, Nariah. She looked up, slowly. You've never said that to me before. I've thought it 1,000 times, he replied. But tonight, I figured I'd say it while I had the chance. She let the compliment settle instead of swatting it away. Thank you. They didn't talk about Ezra for the first half hour. Not because they didn't want to, because for once, they didn't need to. They talked about childhoods, hers in small-town North Carolina, his in New Jersey before moving south. He told her about the time he got suspended in high school for hacking into the school's attendance system to fix his friend's truancy records. I was bored, he said. You were bold, she countered. Same thing. She laughed, not politely, freely. It had been too long since she'd done that with a man across the table from her. After dinner, they walked a few blocks toward the riverfront, passing empty benches and dimmed street lamps. The night air was warm, still. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. If I had told you back then, when I first found out I was pregnant, would you have stayed? He stopped walking. Yes, he said. But I wouldn't have been ready. I would have tried, but it wouldn't have been enough. She swallowed that honesty like a heavy truth pill. But now? She asked. I'm still not perfect, still figuring it out. But I show up now because it's not about being ready anymore. It's about being present. She nodded slowly. That matters. They sat on a bench near the edge of the riverwalk, watching the light ripple across the water. No one rushed the moment. No forced touch. No awkward lean-ins. Until Nariah turned to him and whispered, I want to kiss you. Corbin didn't move. He just said, then kiss me. And she did. Slow, certain, soft. He didn't stay the night. She didn't ask him to. But when he dropped her off, he leaned in and kissed her temple before she opened the door. I'll see you next week, he said. And Nariah, standing in the same doorway she once stood in with doubts and walls, smiled and said, I'll be here. Corbin kept showing up. Not just for Ezra, but for Nariah. He didn't bring speeches or promises. He brought himself. One Saturday morning, he showed up early with groceries. Not flashy things, but things she forgot to put on her list. Almond milk, Ezra's favorite oatmeal, fresh basil for her Sunday pasta. Figured I'd beat the traffic, he said casually, carrying the bags in. You figured right, she replied, smiling. Ezra, still in his onesie, rushed into his arms. This was the new rhythm. Simple, quiet, safe. Nariah's mother had been watching it all from a gentle distance. She hadn't said much about Corbin, just polite greetings and long, observant stares. But one evening, after dinner, as they stood washing dishes together, her mother finally spoke. You're different now. Nariah looked up. Different how? You don't flinch when someone offers help. You smile more when you think no one's watching. Nariah wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. I think I'm letting myself trust again. Her mother nodded. He's steady. That's rare. I'm scared it's too good to be true. Her mother handed her a clean plate. That's how good things feel at first. Later that week, Corbin stayed over again, this time in the guest room by choice. Nariah didn't need him to stay for her. Ezra was healthy. Her life was steady. But she wanted him there. That night, after Ezra was asleep, she stepped into the guest room with 2 mugs of tea. He was seated on the bed, laptop closed, reading Ezra's daycare updates on his phone. She handed him the tea. You're very involved, he chuckled. Is that a warning? It's surprising. I miss too much to stay distant now. She sat beside him, close, but not too close. Sometimes I wonder how different things would have been if I stayed, she said. Corbin looked at her. Do you regret leaving? No, she said softly. I regret not knowing how to stay and still protect myself. He nodded slowly. I regret not giving you a reason to. They sat in silence, sipping tea. Naraya glanced down at his hand resting near hers on the bed. She didn't reach for it, but she didn't move away either. You're the only man I've ever wanted to trust and feared trusting at the same time, she whispered. Corbin didn't respond right away. Then he said, That's the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me. She didn't kiss him that night. He didn't ask. But when she stood up to leave the room, he reached for her wrist gently and said, I'll earn you back, not all at once, but fully. Her eyes met his. Don't promise, just keep showing up. He nodded. I will. The following week brought something unexpected, not drama, not conflict. Something Naraya hadn't felt in a long time. Consistency. Corbin called at the same time each evening. He asked about Ezra's cough, sent a video of a book he wanted to buy, checked in about her upcoming certification class. No games, no silence gaps, no guessing. It was almost unsettling how normal it began to feel. But Naraya had learned not to rush comfort. Instead, she observed, noted the way Corbin listened when she vented about deadlines, the way he waited before offering advice, the way he never tried to insert himself, only offered himself. That difference mattered. On Thursday, Ezra had a meltdown over nothing and everything. The wrong spoon, too much syrup, the tag on his shirt. Naraya tried everything. By the time she sat on the floor beside his crib, rubbing slow circles on his back, her nerves were threadbare. She texted Corbin without thinking. He won't sleep. I'm exhausted. The reply came in under a minute. Want me to drive down? She stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered for a second before typing. No, just needed to say it to someone who gets it. I get it. You're doing great. She didn't reply. But her eyes stung. Sometimes, love doesn't show up with flowers. Sometimes, it just shows up with silence, presence, and the right words at the right time. That weekend, they met halfway at a small botanical garden with a toddler section. Ezra ran through the tall grasses like a wild wind. Corbin brought sandwiches. Naraya brought extra wipes. They shared juice boxes and conversation under a shaded bench. I told my therapist about you, Corbin said, unwrapping his sandwich. Naraya turned. You're in therapy? Started after you left. Stayed in it once I realized how much I didn't know about being emotionally available. She blinked. Wow. I had to learn how to stop being proud before being present. Her chest tightened. That means more than you know. Corbin looked out across the grass. She said it's okay to be afraid of getting it wrong, as long as I don't let fear stop me from trying. You're trying, she said quietly. I want to try with you. Not just around Ezra. With you. Naraya inhaled slowly. You're doing it. After lunch, they walked a quiet path with Ezra asleep in the stroller. Corbin stopped walking and turned toward her. Would it scare you, he asked gently, if I said I still love you? Naraya didn't answer right away. She looked at the trees swaying gently in the wind, the peaceful path ahead of them, the stroller between them. Then she met his eyes. No, she said, but it would scare me more if you stopped. He smiled, not with victory, with relief, and something in her finally let go. That night, Corbin stayed late, but didn't ask to stay over. He tucked Ezra in, kissed his forehead, then turned to Naraya at the door. Let me take you out again. She leaned against the frame. I thought we were already doing this. I want to do it intentionally. Labels? She teased. No pressure, he said. Just clarity. She nodded. Dinner. Next week. I'll plan it right. As he walked to his car, Ezra's toy dinosaur fell from his coat pocket. Nariah picked it up, walked it to him, and smiled. "You're becoming part of the house," she said. "I want to become part of the home." She looked at him for a beat, then handed him the dinosaur, and whispered, "You already are." Corbin arrived for dinner earlier than expected. Ezra spotted his car through the living room window and shouted, "Dada!" before bolting to the door with socks sliding on the tile. Nariah followed, drying her hands on a towel, smiling despite herself. Corbin knocked once, but the door was already opening. "You're early," she said, amused. "You said 6. I thought showing up early might earn me an extra slice of banana bread." She handed him the towel. "You can earn it by finishing dinner without bribing my son with cookies again." He raised a hand in mock surrender. "I promise." Ezra clung to his leg and held up his arms. Corbin lifted him smoothly, holding him close like it had always been that way. "I missed you, little man." Ezra giggled, touching Corbin's face. "Your beard's scratchy." "I'll take that as a compliment." Dinner was simple but warm. Roasted chicken, seasoned rice, and steamed vegetables. Nariah lit 2 small candles on the table. Nothing fancy, just ambiance. Corbin helped Ezra into his seat while Nariah brought the dishes out. He watched her move, confidently, lightly. No makeup tonight. Just a clean face and the soft glow of a woman who knew who she was and didn't need to announce it. They talked easily over dinner. Ezra told a long-winded story about a frog he saw at daycare. Nariah teased Corbin about how poorly he peeled apples. Corbin laughed like he hadn't in years. And Nariah realized, midway through sipping water, that this felt like something most people take for granted, a family dinner. She hadn't had that in years, maybe ever, and she didn't want to forget the way it felt now. After dinner, while Nariah cleaned the kitchen, Corbin bathed Ezra. She could hear their giggles from the bathroom. Splashing water, Corbin, reading a story in different voices, Ezra shouting corrections. By the time Corbin returned, he looked like he'd been in the splash zone of a water park. "Do I get a towel or a medal?" he asked. "Depends. Did he actually let you rinse his hair?" He negotiated a bribe. "Half a cookie." Nariah pointed to the cabinet. "Top shelf." "You get a towel. No medal." Corbin dried his arms and joined her in the living room, while Ezra fell asleep with a picture book across his chest. They sat on the couch quietly for a few minutes, sipping tea. No background music, no TV, just the soft creak of the ceiling fan and the stillness that lived, between people who didn't need to fill the air to feel connection. "I've been thinking," Corbin said after a while. "That's always dangerous," she replied. He smirked. "Serious thought." "Okay. I'm listening." He turned slightly, one arm resting on the back of the couch. "I'd like to set up something legal. Not to take Ezra away, but to protect him. Shared guardianship, medical authorization, something that proves I'm here for real." Nariah's body tensed before she could stop it. He saw it. "I'm not pushing for control," he said. "I know I missed too much to ask for full say in anything. But if something happens, if there's an emergency, I want to be able to step in for him. No red tape, no waiting." She sat with it. "I've never thought about custody papers or legal terms. I was just surviving." "I know." She looked down at her tea. "That's a big step. It doesn't have to be tomorrow." She glanced at him. "You really mean it, don't you?" "I do." Her voice came quieter this time. "You're not just doing this to prove something to me. I'm doing it to be accountable. For both of you." Later, after Corbin left Ezra's room and turned off the hallway light, Nariah was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a soft cardigan, sipping the last of her tea. He joined her. This time, he sat closer than usual. She didn't shift away. "You looked at him tonight like you finally saw yourself in him," she said. "I did. And what did you see?" He paused. "A better version of me." She tilted her head. "Why better? He already has your heart." Her eyes softened. Corbin continued. "I've spent years trying to outrun parts of myself. I didn't like ambition that blinded me, distance I used to hide. But Ezra, he makes me want to stay rooted. And you." He turned to her. You make me want to stay honest. Nariah swallowed hard. Corbin. He held up a hand gently. You don't have to say anything. But I want to. She placed her mug down, turning to face him. You've shown up for us. Not with words, but with actions. You've given Ezra what I couldn't, and you've given me space I didn't know I needed. He waited. I'm not saying I'm ready for everything, she said, but I'm ready for more. More of what? More of this. More of you. They didn't kiss that night, but they stood on the porch a little longer, talked about childhood memories, favorite movies, funny parenting hacks. It was the kind of night that didn't beg to be memorable, and maybe that's why it was, because it wasn't built on intensity. It was built on trust. When Corbin finally left, he kissed Ezra's cheek and whispered something Nariah couldn't hear. Then he looked at her at the door and smiled. Same time next week. She nodded. Bring your suitcase, she said. You're not a visitor anymore. That night, as she lay in bed, listening to Ezra's soft breathing from the next room, Nariah realized something she hadn't dared to admit aloud. This wasn't just healing. This was becoming a home. And for the first time since it all began, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Corbin didn't bring a suitcase the next time. He brought two, one with clothes, the other with blocks, coloring books, a foldable playmat, Ezra's favorite snacks, and 2 storybooks he'd already memorized. Nariah stood at the door, arms crossed. So you're moving in? Weekend edition only, he replied. I figured we'd start with a pilot phase. Ezra burst past her and dove into the bags. Dada! Dino book! Corbin crouched, lifted his son, and hugged him tightly. Nariah watched, not because she doubted him, but because the sight of them, man and child, warmth without performance, still hadn't lost its weight. That weekend was different, not because anything dramatic happened, but because everything was intentional. Corbin fixed the loose leg on Ezra's high chair without being asked. He folded laundry, like he'd been doing it for years. He helped Nariah prep meals, cleaned up toys before she noticed, and carried Ezra to his crib with a father's rhythm. At night, they sat in the living room after Ezra was asleep, 2 mugs of tea between them, a blanket. Tossed over their knees, a film playing quietly in the background neither of them watched. They didn't fill every silence. They didn't force any next step. They simply existed in it, together. On Sunday morning, Ezra woke up crying from a bad dream. Before Nariah could even reach the door, Corbin was already in his room, kneeling by the crib. I'm here, buddy, he whispered. You're okay. Ezra hiccuped through soft sobs, reaching up. Corbin scooped him out gently, held him against his chest, paced slowly. Nariah stood by the door, one hand over her mouth, watching. Ezra quieted within minutes, and for the first time ever, he didn't call for Mama. He fell asleep against Corbin's shoulder, peacefully, safely. Later that afternoon, while Ezra napped, they sat on the porch again. Corbin leaned back against the railing, legs stretched out. He called me Daddy today. Nariah nodded. I heard. It felt unreal. You are his dad, she said. It's not a title. It's what you've been showing up as. He looked at her. So what am I to you? Nariah looked down at her hands. I've asked myself that question 100 times, she said softly. But now? You're the man who came back when he didn't have to, who didn't just fight for space. You created it, and let me walk in at my own pace. He was quiet for a moment. Then, can I ask for more? She turned to him. Like what? Corbin inhaled. A future. Her eyes didn't move. He continued. Not a perfect one, not rushed, but one where we build, slowly, together. Nariah stood and paced a little, arms folded, the wind lifting her curls around her face. I don't want a future built on guilt, she said. It's not, he said. It's built on presence. She turned back to him. Say it again. It's built on presence, he repeated. Not pressure, not repair, just presence. Her shoulders dropped. She walked back over and sat beside him. This time, her fingers found his. naturally, gently, with choice. That night, they watched Ezra sleep from the doorway. Corbin whispered, "He sleeps like you, arms over his head." Nariah smiled, "And he grinds his teeth like you." Corbin chuckled softly. She looked at him. "This is the part where everything used to fall apart for me." "What part?" "The quiet, the good. I never trusted it would last. And now?" She looked back at Ezra. "I'm learning to trust what stays." They didn't define the relationship with labels that night. No boyfriend, no partner, no US carved into stone. But they defined it in action, in presence, in Ezra's laugh when they read to him side by side, in Nariah's comfort to walk barefoot into the kitchen while Corbin brewed her morning coffee, in Corbin's phone left face down on the counter, not out of secrecy, but out of intention. They were becoming a family, not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice. And as Corbin packed one of the suitcases on Sunday evening, he paused and looked at her from across the room. "Next weekend?" Nariah nodded. "Bring less clothes." He raised a brow. "Why?" She smiled. "Because eventually you won't need to leave." Monday morning came with a stillness Nariah hadn't known in years. Ezra was humming to himself in the living room, building a city out of plastic blocks. Sunlight spilled across the floor. A familiar cologne still lingered in the hallway. Corbin had left early, but not without a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "You make peace feel like home. See you Friday." See. She read it 3 times before tucking it into her journal. No flowers, no poetry, just words that felt like truth. That week, Nariah walked into her job with a new kind of confidence. She spoke up during a strategy meeting. She pitched a new client idea. When her manager pulled her aside and said, "You've really stepped into yourself lately," she smiled and said, "Thank you." Because she had, not because of Corbin, but because she'd finally stopped shrinking. That Friday, Corbin showed up with a surprise. Not in a box, not wrapped in ribbons. It was a printed PDF in a folder, legal documents, guardianship, medical authorization, and a notarized letter of commitment to support Ezra's education fund. Nariah opened the folder at the kitchen table, scanned the papers. "This is real," she said. Corbin nodded. "He deserves protection, even if something happens to me." "You do too." She looked up at him. "You thought through all this. I had time to think when I wasn't here. I'm done wasting that time now." Nariah took a deep breath. "You want to sign today?" "Only if you're ready." "I am." They signed together that evening. No lawyers in the room. Just them, Ezra napping down the hall, and the quiet understanding that this wasn't a transaction. It was a vow. After they tucked Ezra in that night, Nariah walked into the guest room where Corbin was folding. Laundry, his things now sitting on the bottom shelf of the closet he once only borrowed space in. She leaned on the doorframe. "You're not a guest anymore," she said. He paused. "I know. Then maybe you should stop sleeping like one." He turned to her slowly. "You sure?" She nodded. He didn't rush forward. He walked, slow, steady, to her. His hands found her waist, like they'd been waiting. Her fingers curled around his collar. And when their lips met, it wasn't desperate. It was deep, warm, unhurried, like they had all the time in the world, and none to waste. They made love that night, not in whispers or fire, but in reverence, like 2 people who had carried too much, broken too quietly, and now found safety in the space between each other's ribs. There were no confessions, no promises of forever, just a shared breath, a held gaze, and Nariah's head resting on Corbin's chest after, listening to the same rhythm Ezra had grown inside. Morning came with a rainstorm, but inside the house, it was warm. Ezra climbed onto the bed, wedging himself between them. "Mama," he whispered. "I had a dream Dada lived here." Nariah smiled. "Maybe that dream's coming true." Corbin kissed the top of his head. "I hope so." Ezra giggled and threw the blanket over all 3 of them. And, for the first time, under the covers, and without a plan. They didn't need a title. They already felt like a family. 3 months later, the rhythm had changed, but gently, naturally. Corbin no longer packed weekend bags. His razor had its own place in the bathroom drawer. His laptop charger shared an outlet with Naraya's. Ezra's drawings now decorated not just the fridge, but the hallway, stick figures, labeled Mama, Me, and Dada, with extra hearts drawn in red crayon. It didn't feel like moving in. It felt like unfolding, like someone who'd been waiting outside the door, finally being invited home. Naraya stood in the kitchen one morning, Ezra in his booster seat, munching on banana slices while Corbin made coffee. "You've made this place feel like it was always yours," she said. Corbin looked up. "It was always yours first. I'm just lucky you made space." "You didn't take space," she said. "You earned it." He reached across the counter and gently touched her hand. "And I plan to keep earning it, every day." That weekend, they went back to Charlotte, not for business, not for meetings, but to introduce Ezra to the place Naraya once worked, the streets where she once walked with secrets in her chest. Corbin drove them past the old office building. Naraya looked up at the tall windows and exhaled. "I used to feel so small here." "You were never small," Corbin said, parking the car. "You just outgrew that version of your life." Ezra was asleep in the back seat. Corbin turned to her. "Can I take you somewhere?" She nodded. They walked 3 blocks in silence and stopped in front of a small building with a sign that read, "Ellison and Lane Creative." Naraya blinked. He handed her a set of keys. "What is this?" she asked, breath catching. "I bought this space last month," he said, "and I registered it in both our names. A place for you to create, to run your own ideas, build something new on your terms." Her voice trembled. "Corbin, you've always been the vision. I just want to be the structure." They toured the inside, dusty, open, full of potential, and Naraya saw it. Not just the walls, the future. One where she didn't have to choose between motherhood and dreams, between love and self-respect, between safety and growth. Back home that night, after Ezra had fallen asleep in his car seat and Corbin carried him gently to bed, Naraya sat on the edge of hers, staring at the gift. "You know," she said, "you don't have to prove anything else." "I'm not proving," Corbin replied, standing in the doorway. "I'm planting." She looked up. "What are you planting?" "Legacy, not in buildings, in people, in you, in Ezra, in the life we're building that no one sees on Instagram, but matters more than any campaign I've ever closed." She stood, walked over, and kissed him softly, not because she felt emotional, but because she finally felt sure. Months passed. Ezra's words expanded. Naraya's side business took root. Corbin split his time between his agency and the new space they now shared. There were hard days, sleep-deprived ones, messy rooms, and mismatched socks. But, through it all, they stayed. And one afternoon, as they watched Ezra ride a tricycle up and down the driveway, Corbin leaned over and said, "You ever think about marriage?" Naraya smirked. "You asking?" "I'm preparing." She took his hand. "Take your time," she said. "This is already everything." Not every love story begins perfectly. Some start in pain, silence, or with a secret kept too long. Have you ever had to rebuild something from scratch? Not just trust, but your entire sense of self? Do you know what it feels like to love someone and still choose yourself first? This story wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, growth, and how real love doesn't rush, it returns. If this story moved you, type "Love Stayed" in the comments below. Like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that feel honest, healing, and human.